There's a moment that comes quietly, usually in the middle of the night. You're lying there, staring at the ceiling, and you realize something strange. You've become so good at being alone that you've forgotten how to let anyone in. Not because you're cruel, not because you don't care. This is the paradox of independence. We celebrate it, we worship it. We tell ourselves that self-sufficiency is strength, that not needing anyone makes us powerful. And for a while, it does. For a while, it feels like freedom. But then one day, you wake up and realize that the walls you built to protect yourself have become the walls that keep everyone out. And you're standing in the center of a fortress you never meant to live in alone. Maybe it started young. Maybe you learned early that asking for help meant being a burden. That showing need meant showing weakness. Perhaps you watched the adults around you crumble under the weight of their own dependencies, their addictions, their inability to stand on their own. And you promised yourself, quietly, fiercely, that you would never be like that. You would never need anyone that desperately. You would never give another person that much power over your survival. So you learned to tie your own shoes before anyone offered. You stopped crying when you fell, because no one came running anyway. You became the child who never asked for seconds, who never complained, who smiled and said everything was fine even when it wasn't, and people praised you for it. They called you mature, responsible, independent. What they didn't see was that you weren't choosing strength. You were adapting to absence. Psychologists have a term for this. They call it compulsive self-reliance. It's when independence stops being a choice and becomes a defense mechanism. When the thought of depending on someone else doesn't just feel uncomfortable, it feels dangerous. Like opening a door you spent years learning to keep locked. Because here's the truth most people don't talk about. Independence isn't always born from confidence. Sometimes it's born from abandonment, from disappointment, from the quiet realization that the people who were supposed to show up didn't. And so you learned to show up for yourself. You became your own parent, your own protector, your own source of comfort. You stopped waiting for anyone to save you because you realized, painfully, that no one was coming. That's not weakness, that's survival. And the cost is this. When you spend years learning that you can't rely on anyone, you forget how to let anyone be reliable, even when they want to be. Think about how this shows up in your life now. Someone offers to help and your first instinct is to say no, not because you don't need it, but because accepting feels like admitting defeat, like revealing that you're not as strong as you've trained everyone to believe. Someone tries to get close and you pull back, not consciously, but instinctively, because closeness requires vulnerability, and vulnerability feels like standing naked in front of someone who might leave at any moment. You've become so skilled at handling everything alone that the idea of sharing the weight feels foreign, dangerous even. What if they let you down? What if they see how much you actually need and decide it's too much? Better to need nothing, better to carry everything yourself. At least then, the only person who can disappoint you is you. You've made peace with your own limitations in a way you could never make peace with someone else's. But here's where it gets complicated. Because independence, real independence, is beautiful. It's the ability to stand on your own, to make decisions, to build a life that doesn't crumble the moment someone leaves. That's not what we're talking about here. What we're talking about is hyper-independence. The kind that doesn't leave room for connection. The kind that mistakes isolation for strength and loneliness for freedom. Hyper-independence is when you'd rather suffer in silence than ask for a single favor. It's when you've convinced yourself that needing support is the same as being weak. It's when love feels like a threat instead of a refuge, because love requires letting someone matter. And the moment someone matters, they have the power to hurt you. So you keep everyone at arm's length, close enough to avoid loneliness, far enough to avoid danger, and for a while, you might not even notice the cost. You're busy. You're productive. You're handling everything. From the outside, your life looks impressive. Independent apartment, independent career, independent decisions. No one to answer to, no one to disappoint. But inside, there's a quiet ache you can't quite name. A loneliness that doesn't come from being alone, but from being emotionally unreachable even when you're surrounded by people. You go to dinner with friends and you listen to their problems. You offer advice. You show up. But when they ask about you, You smile and say everything's fine, because sharing the truth feels like crossing a line you drew years ago. The line that says your struggles are yours to carry. That burdening others makes you selfish. That needing emotional support is somehow different from offering it. This is the psychology of the hyper-independent. They give endlessly, but receive reluctantly. They're the friend everyone leans on, but who leans on no one. And deep down, they're exhausted, not from the weight they carry, but from the isolation of carrying it alone. Because humans aren't built for that kind of solitude. We're wired for connection, for interdependence, for the kind of relationships where vulnerability is met with care instead of judgment. But when you've been let down enough times, your nervous system learns a different lesson. It learns that vulnerability equals danger. That opening up leads to pain, so it shuts down the pathways to connection and reroutes everything through self-sufficiency. And that adaptation, while protective, slowly walls off the very thing that makes life feel meaningful. The ability to be truly seen by another person, to be known, to be held, not physically, but emotionally, by someone who says, "I see you struggling, and you don't have to do this alone." There's a deep loneliness that comes with hyper-independence. Not the loud kind that makes you reach out desperately, but the quiet kind that settles in your bones, the kind that whispers you're doing everything right and still something's missing, because you are doing everything right. By the standards you set for yourself, you're surviving, you're succeeding, you're not falling apart, but you're also not letting anyone in. And without that, success starts to feel hollow, like building a beautiful house and realizing there's no one you trust enough to invite inside. Sometimes people mistake hyper-independence for not needing love. They see someone who's always fine, always capable, always together, and they assume that person doesn't need the same care everyone else does. Hyper-independent people don't need less love. They've just learned to need it quietly, to want it silently, to ache for connection while simultaneously pushing it away, because wanting feels too dangerous. And the cruelest part? The world rewards this. Society celebrates the person who never asks for help, who never complains, who handles everything with grace. We call them strong, resilient, admirable. We hold them up as examples, but we rarely stop to ask what it cost them to become that way. We rarely wonder what they're carrying in silence, or what they've had to give up to maintain that image of unshakable strength. Because here's the truth. Strength isn't the absence of need. Strength is being able to need someone and trust that they'll show up. Strength is vulnerability in the face of uncertainty. Strength is saying, "I can't do this alone," and believing that asking doesn't make you less worthy of love. But if you've spent years learning the opposite, unlearning it feels impossible. It feels like dismantling the very foundation you built your identity on. Psychologically, this creates what's called an avoidant attachment style. It's when your early experiences taught you that depending on others leads to disappointment, so you developed a strategy. Avoid dependence altogether. Handle everything yourself. Don't give anyone the chance to let you down, because you won't give them the chance to matter in the first place. And in childhood, that strategy works. It protects you from repeated pain. But in adulthood, it isolates you from the very connections that could heal that pain. Avoidant attachment doesn't mean you don't want connection. It means you want it desperately, but you're terrified of it simultaneously. You crave intimacy, but the moment someone gets too close, your system floods with anxiety. Your mind starts scanning for exits. You find reasons to pull back, to create distance, to remind yourself why being alone is safer. That people leave. That you were right to protect yourself. That independence was the only option. But what if it wasn't? What if the people who left weren't leaving because you were too much or not enough? What if the walls you built to protect yourself became the very thing that kept love out? That's the devastating realization many hyper-independent people eventually face. That they've been so focused on not needing anyone that they forgot how to let themselves be needed, how to let themselves be loved, how to trust that someone might actually stay if given the chance. And here's where it gets even deeper. Hyper-independence isn't just about relationships. It's about your relationship with yourself. Because when you've convinced yourself that needing help is weakness, you stop being gentle with your own struggles. You start treating your pain like something to manage alone, to push through, to handle without complaint. You become harsh with yourself in ways you'd never be with someone you love. You deny yourself the compassion you freely give others, and slowly, you start to believe that your worth is tied to your ability to never falter. That's exhausting. It's inhuman. Because we all falter. We all break. We all need. The question isn't whether you'll need support in your life. It's whether you'll let yourself receive it when it's offered. Whether you'll let someone see you on your worst day and trust that they won't use it against you. But belief doesn't come easy when your history has taught you otherwise. When every time you opened up, you got hurt. When every time you asked for help, you were made to feel like a burden. When every time you showed need, it was met with irritation or indifference or abandonment. Your nervous system remembers, and it's doing everything it can to make sure you never feel that way again. So it keeps you safe, alone, protected, and profoundly disconnected. The irony is that hyper-independent people often attract others who need a lot of support. People who are struggling gravitate toward them, hoping some of that strength will rub off, and the hyper-independent person, conditioned to give, steps into that role easily. They become the caretaker, the problem solver, the emotional anchor. They do for others what they wish someone would do for them. Because they never ask for it. They've made themselves so available to others' needs that their own become invisible. And over time, resentment builds, not toward any one person, but toward the pattern itself. The pattern of always being the strong one, the reliable one, the one who has it all together. Because deep down, they're tired. They're tired of pretending. They're tired of carrying weight that isn't entirely theirs. They're tired of being needed in ways that feel one-sided, but they don't know how to stop. Because stopping feels like failing, like admitting they can't handle it. And that admission, to someone who's built their entire identity on capability, feels like death. So they keep going. They keep performing strength. They keep saying they're fine. And the loneliness deepens. Because the more capable you appear, the less people think to check on you. The less they think to ask if you need anything. They assume you'll say something if you do. But you won't. Because saying something requires believing that your needs matter as much as theirs. And you stopped believing that a long time ago. This is the trap of hyper-independence. It looks like freedom, but it feels like exile. It promises safety but delivers isolation. It convinces you that not needing anyone is power, when really, it's just another form of self-abandonment. Because you're not choosing to be alone, you're choosing to protect yourself from the pain of connection. And survival, no matter how skilled you become at it, is not the same as living. Living requires risk. It requires letting people see you. It requires admitting that you don't have all the answers, that you can't do everything alone, that sometimes you need someone to hold space for your pain without trying to fix it. And trust, for someone who's been repeatedly let down, feels like the most dangerous thing in the world, because trust means giving someone the power to hurt you. And you've spent your entire life learning to never give anyone that power again. But here's the question that changes everything. What if the cost of protecting yourself is higher than the cost of being hurt? What if the loneliness of hyper-independence is more painful than the vulnerability of connection? What if the walls you built are keeping out not just the people who might hurt you, but also the people who might love you in ways you've never experienced? Because those people exist. People who won't weaponize your vulnerability. People who won't run when things get hard. People who see your need not as weakness but as humanity. They exist, but you'll never find them from behind the walls. You'll never experience that kind of love if you're convinced you don't need it. Because love, real love, requires letting yourself be known. And being known requires letting someone see the parts of you that aren't strong, that aren't capable, that aren't fine. It requires letting someone see the child in you who's still waiting for someone to notice they're struggling. The part that aches to hear someone say, "You don't have to do this by yourself. I'm here. And I'm not going anywhere." That's the love hyper-independent people crave, but are terrified to receive. Because receiving it means lowering the walls. And lowering the walls means risking everything you've built to protect yourself. But maybe that's the paradox. Maybe the thing you've built to protect yourself has become the thing you need protection from. Maybe the independence that once saved you is now the thing keeping you from the connection that could heal you. Maybe it's time to ask yourself not whether you can do everything alone, but whether you want to, because you can. You've proven that. You're capable, resilient, strong beyond measure. But capability isn't the same as contentment. Resilience isn't the same as rest. Strength isn't the same as peace. And maybe, not because you can't handle it, but because you shouldn't have to. Not alone. Not anymore. There's a softness that comes when you finally let someone in. Not a weakness, but a gentleness. A relief. Like exhaling after holding your breath for years. It doesn't happen all at once. It happens slowly, in small moments. The moment you let yourself cry in front of someone and they don't run. The moment you ask for help and they give it without making you feel small. The moment you admit you're struggling and they respond with, "I'm so glad you told me," instead of "you should have said something sooner." These moments rewire you. They teach your nervous system something it didn't believe was possible. That vulnerability can be met with care. That need doesn't equal burden. That letting someone matter doesn't always end in abandonment. And slowly, carefully, the walls start to come down. Not all at once, not recklessly, but piece by piece, as trust is earned and safety is proven. And you realize that connection, real connection, doesn't weaken you. But getting there requires something difficult. It requires grieving. Grieving the version of yourself who believed they had to do everything alone. Grieving the childhood where no one showed you that it was safe to need. Grieving the relationships you pushed away because you were too scared to let them close. Grieving the years you spent convincing yourself that independence was enough when deep down you knew it wasn't. That grief is heavy. It's the weight of all the times you wanted to reach out but didn't. All the times you needed someone but pretended you were fine. All the moments you suffered in silence because asking for support felt like admitting defeat. That's a lot to carry, and you've been carrying it alone. But you don't have to anymore. You can let it out. You can feel it. You can sit with the sadness of what you missed and the anger at what you had to become. And in feeling it, you create space for something new, because healing doesn't mean forgetting. It means remembering and choosing differently. It means seeing the patterns that kept you safe and honoring them for what they were while recognizing they no longer serve you. It means understanding that the child who learned not to need anyone did so to survive. But you're not that child anymore. You're an adult now. With choices. With agency. With the ability to seek out people who won't repeat the patterns of your past. And those people are out there. People who understand that strength includes vulnerability. People who won't mistake your independence for not needing care. People who see through the facade and love you not despite your struggles but through them. People who know that the strongest thing you can do is admit when you can't do something alone. Those are your people, and they're waiting for you to let them in, but they can't break down the walls for you. Only you can do that. Only you can decide that the risk of connection is worth more than the safety of isolation. Only you can choose to believe that you deserve to be cared for, not because you've earned it through performance, but simply because you exist. And being human means needing others. It's not a flaw, it's the design. We were never meant to do this alone. We were meant to stumble and have someone catch us, to struggle and have someone sit with us in it, to succeed and have someone celebrate with us, to exist and be witnessed, be seen, be known by people who choose to stay not because we're perfect, but because we're real. That's connection, that's intimacy, that's what you've been protecting yourself from, and what you've been aching for all along. So maybe it's time to try something different. Not a grand gesture. Not tearing down all the walls at once. But a small step. Letting one person in just a little. Sharing one thing you'd normally keep hidden. Asking for help with something small. Accepting support when it's offered instead of deflecting. And noticing how it feels. Scary, yes. Vulnerable, absolutely. But maybe also relieving. Maybe also human. Maybe also the beginning of something that looks less like survival and more like living. Because hyper-independence is survival. It's what you did to get through. But you're not just trying to get through anymore. You're trying to build a life. And a life, a real life, requires connection. It requires letting people matter. It requires risking heartbreak for the possibility of being truly known. That's inevitable. But not everyone will. And the ones who stay, the ones who see your walls and wait patiently for you to lower them, the ones who prove through consistency that they're safe, those are the ones worth the risk. And here's what you'll discover when you finally let them in. It makes you brave. Because it takes courage to need someone when you've spent years convincing yourself you don't. It takes strength to say, I can't do this alone, when your entire identity has been built on doing exactly that. It takes vulnerability to trust again after trust has been broken. And all of those things, the courage, the strength, the vulnerability, those are what real independence looks like. Real independence isn't refusing to need anyone. It's knowing you could survive alone, but choosing connection anyway. It's being capable of handling everything, but being wise enough to know you don't have to. It's building a life so full that you could stand on your own, but never wanting to, because you've surrounded yourself with people who make life richer, softer, more meaningful. That's the goal. Not isolation disguised as strength, but connection grounded in choice. And maybe that's the shift that needs to happen. From I don't need anyone to I don't need anyone to survive. But I want people in my life because they make it better. From I can do everything alone to I can do a lot alone, but I'm allowed to ask for help. From needing no one to choosing carefully who I let in and trusting that choice. That's growth. That's healing. That's the other side of hyper-independence. It won't be linear. There will be days when the walls feel safer than vulnerability. Days when you retreat back into self-sufficiency because connection feels too risky. That's okay. Healing isn't about never falling back into old patterns. It's about recognizing when you do and gently guiding yourself back toward openness. It's about being patient with yourself the way you've been patient with everyone else. Because you deserve that. You deserve to be cared for with the same tenderness you've shown the world. You deserve to rest in someone else's strength the way others have rested in yours. You deserve to be held, emotionally, by someone who sees your independence not as a wall but as a choice you're making to let them in. You deserve connection that doesn't feel like a threat but like coming home to a part of yourself you thought you'd lost. And maybe, just maybe, the dark side of independence isn't independence itself. It's forgetting that you were never supposed to carry everything alone. It's mistaking self-sufficiency for self-worth. It's believing that needing nothing makes you strong, when really, it just makes you lonely. The light comes when you remember that strength includes vulnerability, that independence includes interdependence, that you can be whole on your own and still choose to share that wholeness with someone else. Because at the end of the day, we're all just walking each other home. We're all struggling with things we don't talk about. We're all carrying weight we pretend isn't heavy. And the people who seem the strongest, the most independent, the most together, they're often the ones who are silently collapsing under the weight of it all. They're the ones who need someone to say, I see you. I see how hard you're working to hold it together. And you don't have to do that here. Not with me. You can fall apart. That's what you're looking for. Not someone to save you. You don't need saving. You need someone to see you, to witness your struggle without judgment, to hold space for your pain without trying to fix it, to love you not because you're strong, but because you're you. Tired, trying, terrified of needing anyone but aching for connection all the same. That's the truth of hyper-independence. And the truth is, you don't have to live that way anymore. You can choose differently. You can let someone in. You can ask for help. You can admit you're struggling. You can cry in front of someone and trust they won't use it against you. You can need support and believe you're still worthy of giving it. You can be human, fully, messily, imperfectly human, and still be loved. Not despite your needs, but including them. Because that's what love is. Not needing someone to be perfect, but seeing them completely and choosing them anyway. And maybe that's the final truth hiding in the dark side of independence. That the thing you've been running from, vulnerability, need, dependence, is actually the thing that will set you free. Free from the exhaustion of performing strength. Free from the loneliness of carrying everything alone. Free from the belief that you have to earn love through capability. You don't. You never did. You were always worthy of being cared for. You just forgot. And it's okay to remember now. It's okay to lower the walls. It's okay to let someone matter. It's okay to need. You're not weak for wanting connection. You're human. And being human is beautiful, even the messy parts. Especially the messy parts. because that's where real love lives. In the space between I'm fine and I'm struggling. In the vulnerability of admitting you're not invincible and having someone respond with, I never needed you to be. That's the other side. That's where healing begins. That you can stand on your own and still lean on someone when you need to. That strength isn't the absence of need. It's the courage to need anyway. You just have to choose to use it, not to keep people out, but to let the right ones in. And when you do, when you finally let yourself be seen, really seen, you'll realize something. That the fortress you built wasn't protecting you. It was isolating you. And the moment you let someone pass the walls, the moment you allow yourself to be vulnerable and they meet you with gentleness, you'll understand that this, not perfection, not performance, but presence. Someone who sees your independence and says, I know you can do this alone. I'm here, and I'm not leaving. That's the gift on the other side of hyper-independence. Not dependence, but interdependence. A life where you're strong enough to stand alone, but never have to. Where you're capable enough to handle everything but wise enough to share the load. Where you're independent enough to survive, but connected enough to thrive. That's the balance. That's the healing. That's what's waiting when you're ready to let the walls come down. And maybe you're ready now. Maybe you just needed permission to believe that wanting connection doesn't make you weak. That asking for help doesn't erase your strength. That letting someone in doesn't mean you're broken. You're not broken. You were just doing what you had to do to survive. And you survived beautifully. But now it's time to do more than survive. It's time to live. Fully. Openly. With all the messy vulnerability that comes with being human. Because that's where life is. Not in the fortress, but in the space between people who choose each other, who see each other, who hold each other through the hard parts and celebrate each other through the good. That's what you deserve. That's what's possible. And it starts with a single choice, the choice to believe that you are worthy of being cared for, not because you're perfect, but because you're you, and you, with all your walls and wounds and fierce independence, are worth loving. You always have been.